The Fangshan district is situated in the southwest of Beijing, 38 kilometers away from downtown Beijing. Until recently, it was best known for its petrochemical and steel plants. Today, this neighborhood of sleepy apartment buildings and train tracks is part of a mobile revolution enveloping cities across China, the world's biggest rollout of 5G. China Mobile, which is one of the biggest mobile operators in the mainland and the government of Fangshan, outfitted a 6-mile road with 5G cell towers. Since September 2018, companies have been using the connectivity to test wireless communications between autonomous vehicles and their surroundings. The 5G network transmits data from car sensors, roadside sensors, and video cameras installed above the road to a local data center, which analyzes the information and sends it back to the vehicles to help them navigate. Xiong'an is another new city that the government is building 80 miles southwest of Beijing to ease crowding in the capital. China Mobile and China Telecom have already established test networks there. Companies including web giants Baidu are using these networks to live stream events in virtual reality, and as in Fangshan, enable autonomous vehicles to transmit data to each other so they can avoid collisions. Local authorities have encouraged developers to create 5G-based applications related to telemedicine and urban infrastructure. How does 5G make this possible? Unlike previous generations of mobile technology, which tended to introduce a single novel feature for users, say for instance, 1G lets you walk and talk, 2G lets you send text, 3G got you into the internet, and 4G lets you stream. 5G promises a whole suite of dramatic improvements. It uses entirely new wireless infrastructure to achieve speeds up to 100 times faster than 4G. Comparing the speed of 4G to 5G would be like comparing the speed of, let's say, a Toyota Corolla to an F-35 jet fighter. And 5G promises to nearly eliminate any processing delays. It will also kickstart the Internet of Things, since it was designed to connect billions of machines, appliances, and sensors at low cost without draining their batteries. China knows this too well. In its 13th five-year plan, the government describes 5G as a strategic emerging industry and a new area of growth. And in its Made in China 2025 plan, which outlines its goal of becoming a global manufacturing leader, it vows to make breakthroughs in 5th-generation mobile communication. China is committed to make this work, no matter the cost and the consequences. But why will China be throwing everything they have at developing 5G? National pride, for one thing. China sees 5G as its first chance to lead wireless technology development on a global scale. European countries adopted 2G before other countries in the 1990s. Japan pioneered 3G in the early 2000s, and the US dominated the launch of 4G. China has the world's largest mobile market by subscriber and network size. At the end of August 2018, China had 1.1 billion 4G mobile subscribers, more than the population of the US, Indonesia, Russia, Japan, and Germany combined. Other countries have the lead in wireless communications technology development, but this time China is leading in telecommunications rather than playing catch-up. Money is another good reason. The Chinese government views 5G as crucial to the country's tech sector and economy. If big data is the new oil of the digital era, then 5G is the next set of pipes that will deliver it. And unlike previous generations, China is determined to own more of this infrastructure, giving it mastery of its own industrial future. After years of making copycat products, Chinese tech companies want to become the next Apple or Microsoft innovative global giants worth nearly $1 trillion. The China Academy of Information and Communications Technology, a government-run research institute, estimates that 5G will create more than 8 million jobs domestically by 2030. The agency thinks major industries, including energy and healthcare, will spend billions of dollars collectively on 5G equipment and wireless service during that period. 5G will permit the connection and interaction of billions of devices worldwide. 5G will transform the daily lives of millions as well as local and national economies. And it will sketch the future of the digital economy. Whichever country wins this race will enjoy lasting advantages in multiple areas. China already enjoys a wide lead in 5G over the United States on account of its dominant telecom company, Huawei Technologies, a symbol of both Chinese advanced accomplishments and its national priorities. 5G is a game-changing technological platform, allowing wireless communications at much faster, less interrupted, and less power-demanding rates. Initial 5G speeds have been predicted to reach 1.4 gigabits per second, roughly 20 times faster than current 4G networks. They are expected to reach 100 times the speed of 4G. 5G will soon become a distinctive and distinguishing feature of technologically advanced, economically competitive countries. As mentioned earlier, a 5G platform will permit the Internet of Things to evolve into the next great technological, industrial, and economic frontier. The value potential for IoT has been estimated at $3.9 to $11.1 trillion per year by 2025. 5G will permit IoT to help machines to interact in unprecedented ways, enable the collection and analysis of data at a scale never approached, and promote the creation of the next generations of self-driving cars. Ultra-high definition video, remote surgery, industrial robots, smartphones, and virtual reality, amongst others. IoT advances will require much higher performance than current wireless networks allow, but 5G can accommodate it. 5G can permit up to 1 million connections per square kilometer at very low rates of power consumption. The great challenge in installing a 5G network is that it is exceptionally expensive. A high 5G above 6 GHz spectrum network, where the real advantages lie, demands a completely different infrastructure from 4G networks and a much more dense network of transmitters. 15 to 20 5G transmitters will be required per square kilometer in high-density sites, compared to 2 to 5 for a 4G network. The total cost of ownership of a high 5G network is estimated at 4 to 6 times higher than the current cost of a 4G network. 5G networks will likely become a differentiator between wealthy urban centers, which will obtain 5G quickly, and other less developed, more rural areas, which will not. 5G will certainly become a key feature for cities to recruit and maintain its tech communities, attract new businesses, and woo new residents. 5G may rapidly create digitally preferred districts, to which those seeking 5G for work or entertainment will gravitate. Urban development will likely be affected by the location and intensity of this technological platform, a platform governmental authorities may not control. Huawei is China's most advanced telecom company and is one of China's most admired domestic firms. They are the world's second largest smartphone maker. Its 180,000 worldwide employees include 80,000 engineers. It manages the phone networks of half of the world. While half of its business is in China, Huawei enjoys an estimated 40% market share in Europe. The Chinese government intends for Huawei to become the dominant global 5G vendor and to install 5G networks worldwide. In their 5G efforts, Huawei and other Chinese telecom manufacturers have been directly supported by the Chinese government with finance, project support, and research. As achieving 5G preeminence is a stated goal in the Chinese government's strategic report Made in China 2025. In many ways, Huawei is a successful embodiment of Made in China 2025, a Chinese company with emerging dominance in a critical tech sector, significantly advanced by direct government support. China's intervention in the race for 5G dominance has been decisive and effective. Since 2015, China has outspent the US in 5G infrastructure investment by $24 billion, and the US may never catch up. China's 5G investment plan of $400 billion over 5 years dwarfs any comparable US effort. 5G equipment is estimated to be 35% less expensive to install in China than in the US. As a result, since 2015, China has built 350,000 new 5G cell sites, while the US has built fewer than 30,000. These towers and small cells are the beating hearts of 5G. As a result, Huawei is perceived as the dominant vendor to develop global 5G networks. Buttressed by unflinching government support, Huawei enjoys capital advantages no Western private telecom company can match. Given the enormous expense of building 5G networks, Western companies prepared to partner with Huawei to create these networks in their countries. Upon taking office, President Trump declared a Cold War on China, re-evaluating the PRC as a threat to the United States. This contest between China's centrally directed economy and the US market economy had become bitter. But over 5G, Huawei's advantage of government support abruptly became a huge vulnerability. The Trump administration officials organized a campaign against Huawei's participation in 5G networks in countries including Britain, Poland, and Germany, and drafted an executive order that would prevent US companies from using Chinese-made equipment. However, in the 9-week period, this US policy hostility was supplemented by serious legal charges. On December 1st, 2018, Sabrina Meng, Huawei's CFO and the daughter of Huawei's founder, was detained in Canada at the behest of the US Justice Department, who charged her with circumventing US sanctions against Iran and stealing trade secrets, and requested her extradition to the US for trials. Western governments had long considered Huawei an active participant in Chinese espionage efforts. In 2012, the US House Intelligence Committee concluded that both Huawei and ZTE, another Chinese telecom firm, were functioning as agents of the PRC government, that their technology was being used for espionage. Among the Five Eyes, the intelligence services of the US, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, each service advocated to their government that Huawei not be permitted to participate in creating domestic 5G networks. As a result, both Australia and New Zealand banned Huawei from participating in building their 5G networks for national security reasons, despite Huawei's considerable financial and technological advantages. As a Chinese company, Huawei is required by law to assist the Chinese government when requested on national security grounds. Article 7 of China's 2017 National Intelligence Law states that any organization and citizen shall, in accordance with the law, support, provide assistance, and cooperate in national intelligence work, and guard the secrecy of any national intelligence work that they are aware of. If Huawei were to build and manage 5G networks around the world, will it be required to provide information to the Chinese government upon request? Furthermore, Article 22 of the 2014 Counter-Espionage Law that was updated in 2017 states that during a counter-espionage investigation, relevant organizations and individuals must truthfully provide information and must not refuse. The Chinese approach of individual and corporate responsibility for national security is the opposite of the US system's focus on individual liberties and privacy, and is a significant point of distinction in US-Chinese issues of wireless communications management. But why exactly is it so important for the US to build 5G networks before China? The benefits of 5G are obvious. But today, the US doesn't have the fastest home broadband speeds, nor the fastest or most widely available 4G networks, and often lags behind countries such as Finland, Japan, and South Korea in such metrics. A Chinese scholar in the US named Wang Mianmian attributed her brief disappearance to the absence of mobile signal during a trip to a US forest. The news set off a discussion on the telecommunications infrastructure gap between China and the US. US technology leads the world. How can it not resolve the tiny problems of the lack of mobile phone signals in forests? Some people have seen passengers reading books and newspapers in subways in the US and some European countries, while Chinese subway passengers are mostly found using their mobile phones. Due to this, it is believed that Americans and Europeans love to read, while the Chinese don't. But the truth is, it is not because of the love of reading, but due to poor network signals in the subway. When there is no signal on the subway, people cannot use their mobile phones. In recent years, Huawei and ZTE have contracted some countries' subway signal projects. Now, people in these countries have also put down their books and picked up mobile phones in the subway. According to reports, there are currently approximately 6 million 4G base stations worldwide, more than half of which are in China, and about 300,000 in the US. The per capita 4G base station ownership in China also far exceeds that of the US. China's mobile phone signal coverage ranks the first among major global powers. How come China have so many base stations? This is because of a national project in China in 2003. The project required that more than 95% of remote mountainous areas should be covered with communication signals, and the fees must not be higher than those in urban areas. This is a policy that is against market rules, because the more prosperous the area, the lower the cost of installing telecommunications infrastructure. Just place several base stations antennas on top of buildings and tens of millions of people will be covered. But in remote areas, it requires an iron tower with a minimum cost of 300,000 yuan, which is about 45 to 50,000 US dollars to build one base station. The tower may only cover one village, and the monthly income may not be enough to even cover the electricity bill, let alone the cost of fixing wires and connecting cables across mountains. So building base stations in remote areas is bound to be a business that will lose money. But China is wealthy, they can afford to invest for the long term. However, Based on the advantage of the Chinese system, each of the three major telecom operators was responsible for setting up the telecom infrastructure in thousands of villages, regardless of the cost. It took more than 10 years of hard work to complete the project. Mobile phone signals in remote Chinese rural areas are now stronger than most capital cities in Western countries. Meanwhile, in the US, telecommunications operations are completely market-oriented. Where there is money, there is signal. Private enterprises are not interested in doing business that will lose money. And the US government, unlike the Chinese government, cannot assign tasks to telecom operators by force. China is now taking advantage of these base stations to build cell sites for 5G, something the US have to start doing from ground zero. A widely cited 2016 report estimates that the construction and maintenance of 5G networks in the US could result in 3 million jobs and a $500 billion boost to GDP. But will all those jobs end up overseas if China is the first country with a nationwide 5G network? Remember, Europe was quicker to roll out 2G, and Japan was the first with 3G. But that hardly deterred Apple and Google from dominating the smartphone market. But if China beats the US by a year or two, it could damage the US's ability to compete in the global technology market. 3G began rolling out in the US in 2002. It made possible the iPhone, which debuted in 2007, and the app market, which drove enormous investment in mobile computing. Then 4G, which made its commercial debut in 2011 in the US, made smartphones and apps even more appealing. Apps like Instagram, Uber, and Lyft were able to reach critical mass before competitors from other countries, giving the US an edge. Ultimately, it's the decision of consumers and the private sector that determines the winners and losers in technology. The US beat Europe and Japan because Apple created a product that took smartphones mainstream. Google built a popular mobile operating system and gave it away for free, and Facebook built a platform that keeps people glued to their phones. The concern is that if China delivers widespread access to 5G first, its companies will get a head start on creating the next generation of high-tech products and services. That's less of a concern with smaller countries such as South Korea, because Korean companies won't have a large market to test and refine ideas. But China's 1.4 billion population provides the perfect place for a company to grow a business before exporting to other countries. Consider the WeChat instant messaging app, which offers mobile payments, online banking, car services, and more. Western companies have been trying to emulate its success and functionality for years, with no definite success. Concerns about China's lead in 5G spill into national security. Huawei's products are now used by carriers around the world. But the US government has long worried that Huawei could help the Chinese government spy on US citizens, businesses, or political leaders. And to some extent, this fear from the US government and its allies is valid. Huawei is effectively blocked from the US market. But if telecommunications equipment companies in the US and allied countries exit the US market, US carriers might be left without any option. Under Donald Trump's presidency, the US has sought to convince countries to outright ban Huawei from their next generation mobile networks known as 5G. But success has been limited. The UK, one of America's closest allies, said Huawei can play a limited role in its 5G rollout. The problem is the US can't offer an alternative and doesn't have any coherent policy around 5G. It's not true that the US doesn't have a dog in the 5G fight. Companies like Qualcomm and Intel will be a key part of chips in 5G. But it is true that the US doesn't have a player that can afford an end-to-end 5G setup like Huawei can. Companies like Qualcomm and Intel can build modems and chips, but they don't have the ability to build cell sites, masts, base stations, and radios. But Huawei can do all this at once. One of the advantages that Huawei has reportedly had is on cost, which experts have said comes from Chinese state help. Reports of Chinese banks offering favorable financial deals for Huawei have also been used to back up this claim. On top of this, Huawei holds key patents for 5G and has been one of the biggest players in helping to set the so-called technical standards over the past decade. That means it will play a huge role in how 5G looks across the world moving forward, whether the USA likes it or not. The Netherlands' leading wireless carrier chose Huawei to provide equipment for its next generation 5G wireless network. The carrier, known as KPN, insisted the choice was based on quality. But Huawei had another advantage: price. Huawei underbid the existing vendor, Swedish firm Ericsson, by 60%, offering a price that wouldn't even cover the cost of parts. Market dominance and control is what the company is after and not profits. This strategy is a strategy that some Chinese brands like Xiaomi have used in the past to gain market dominance and control. And this strategy is still very much effective even today. Manufacture high-quality products and sell them below the cost of production, a point where no Western company can even try to compete. Over the past decade, Huawei has made similar inroads in Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Canada, and throughout the developing world, offering good products at prices that telecom carriers can't resist and which rivals can't compete either. But despite warning from the American government that Huawei equipment could be used to aid Chinese espionage or sabotage, in Europe the company is moving to expand its foothold in the 5G landscape. In the process, it's undercutting competitors in ways that distort the market. But come to think of it, America has been spying on other nations for decades and extorting data. Or isn't that the job of the CIA?